Welcome back. Today we're going to take a look at Unique Melodies MEST. So, for about a good 2 years, people have been telling me to stop buying budget cheap sets and I should just go buy MEST. And I sort of knew that they were probably right. I think MEST is a legendary set. It set a bar, almost 2 years ago that no budget set will, probably ever hit in the next 2 or 3 years. Very unique, very kind of, I would call it spectacular. When you first get it, it's overwhelming how much detail and detail retrieval you're actually getting out of it and what the treble sounds like. Just lots and lots of overwhelming fun comes out of this guy. And considering this is MEST 1 and there's been a Mark 2 and now there's an MEXT, there's the next version. It's really hard to wrap my head around how those have improved upon the original, considering that I just heard the original. So, here we go, kind of up close. One side says Unique Melody. This one just says UM. I think on the back it just says MEST. Cable itself is actually kind of nice. It's a little too springy, but not too bad. It's definitely on the more expensive side if you try to buy a replacement cable. So let's kind of jump into it. Tons and tons of words here that we'll try to run through kind of quickly. So MEST is best. It's something I've been reading about. People have been saying that for about 2 years straight. So I'm not really sure MEST is the best, but certainly the most unique IM experience for me that I've had to date. It is unique in a lot of ways, and we'll touch on a lot of those things as we go along. But generally, it's just miles away from budget sets. Sometimes I listen to a more expensive set, and you can kind of say, well, if this company hacks away in their drivers and improves and tunes, they can kind of get there. MEST is kind of a different beast. It is really miles away from budgets, and I'm not sure anyone's ever really going to get there. And then, as I said, after Mark II and MEXT, I think they've probably spread that distance even more now. So, yeah, pretty wild. So the treble, it has this almost supernatural sound to it. It goes beyond just resolution and detail retrieval. It sounds enhanced, a bit beyond natural. And what I kept on thinking about is if you have a TWS with ambient sound, and you know how it amplifies lower sounds, more distant sounds, so you could actually hear things that aren't possible to hear with your normal ears. That's sort of what this sounds like. You're hearing so much detail that you're not really sure you could actually hear that in the recording on any other set. Where this detail comes from, I have no idea. How they process it, how they get it to that point, I have no idea. But yeah, it has this sort of extra natural sound to it where, the tiniest detail is now crisp and clear and at a level that you can hear it as if it was just there. But, on sort of any other set, that detail is nothing like it is on MEST. I mean, it is just wild on detail retrieval for me. And then on top of all that, you get this immersive stage, which is super unique. At some point, it can sound like a normal IEM with great stage, but for the most part, it takes on this almost ASMR-like quality where you get this very specific 3D positioning of certain instruments. And if you ever heard an ASMR recorded track, you know that it sounds very 3D. Things have a very definite position in space. And, there's just some tracks on MEST that just kind of come across that. And it's like, I don't know, it almost sounds like they deconstructed and processed and reconstructed it, but that you're not because there's nothing there to really do it. But how it does it, no idea. I think the whole Unique Melody, MEST, Mark II, MEXT, Indigo, I think they all have this fantastic ability to enhance the immersive stage of just about any song. It's very, very unique. For me, that was once you get past the details and the treble and you start to listen to where the sounds are coming from, where they came from on sets in the past, this whole MEST is very, very unique in that respect. So next, volume scaling. It's super serious on this set. It's pretty easy to, I will say, it scales like vector graphics. You can keep on turning it up and it gets sharper and sharper, more detail. it never breaks up, and you will pretty much find yourself in danger territory without this thing ever sweating or even coming close to sounding distorted. You really, really have to watch yourself because you can turn this up to insane levels and it keeps on sounding better and better and it keeps on egging you on to turn it up more and more. But you will find yourself in kind of fatiguing danger levels really quickly, just trying to hear everything that this thing can put out. It's, yeah, really serious volume scaling on this one. So the bone conduction, it's the fourth driver. I have no idea. It's hard to isolate. I'm sure it does something. I really spent a bit of time trying different tips, trying to figure out if I was hearing it, not hearing it. Generally, the concept would be it's going to work better with a deeper fit, forcing more contact with the shell. So I used Aslo shorts for a deeper fit. I don't know. I don't know what to say about bone conduction. If there's a dip switch where you can turn it on or off, that would make sense. If it's the, part that is really doing this ASMR like, really immersive 3D piece, then yeah, I agree. Bone conduction is working well. If that's not it, then no idea. So the downside of all this is it is a very intense experience, and it can be quite fatiguing quickly as you try to absorb this fire hose of detail and detail retrieval and treble levels. And so that first day that I first listened to it, very overwhelming. I wanted to keep on going, but yeah, it was literally like a fire hose shooting at your face. So much going on, so many things that you haven't heard before, all running through your ears. So, if your idea is of a natural set, is one that has a really relaxed treble, this one is not for you. So what does it sound like? I don't know. It's kind of a dry, shallow W. It does have kind of boosts at both ends, but the way the mids are, it sounds like there's kind of a bump there. It's definitely balanced, but it leans a little brighter because of the whole upper range. Coherent or perfectly incoherent, it's kind of a toss-up. It doesn't exactly sound like one single driver doing the whole frequency range. It sounds kind of someone tuned a few different drivers to sound very pleasing, very likable, detail oriented. So yeah, I sort of do think it almost leans more perfectly incoherent to me, and that's not a bad thing at all. I think it adds to the uniqueness of what it sounds like. So when we look at the graph, there's not much on this graph, other than the bass level that sort of resembles what you hear. So lots of good bass here, and then the mids actually are kind of linear and flat and very kind of forward, sound great. This whole bit, no idea. It doesn't necessarily, you can kind of look at maybe there's some elevation here and there's some little more presence, and then they kind of bump out the, somewhere around 5 or 6K, but yeah, the way it all sits in your ear, very hard to correlate what you hear to what you're going to see in the graph, so I won't talk too much about that anymore. So the bass, it is the supporting player of this set. Definitely the mids and the upper range are the primary players. So the first thing, like I said, you notice is the treble on this set, but the bass is actually quite interesting as well. The level's high enough to provide enough balance with the treble. So yeah, I definitely think that, if you're just looking at bass levels, this level is actually quite fun. It's more than enough that most people would ever going to want. You're not going to say this thing is a little light on bass. And there's enough detail and texture to keep up with the mids and the treble, but sometimes it almost crosses the line into a bit much, and it loses some of that detail relative to the treble. And that's where I sort of say sometimes it goes a little incoherent right there, because there's so much detail in the mids and the treble, and then you hear the bass and it's not quite the same. And that's kind of where you lose the illusion of one single driver, one single sound across the whole range. And it's a really big nitpick. I know that, but it is one of those places that I sort of lose it, but I'm not really good. I'm not. It's not a huge complaint. So the bass for me, it does tend to sound. There's a lighter, shallower version of the bass, and that sounds a lot more detailed and a lot more textured. And then, sort of as that bass level rises, and it goes a little deeper, it does sound a little bit too big, and it doesn't quite sound as detailed as sort of this lighter bass. So yeah, I don't think that the bass is top the line, but it's also very, very good. So the mids, definitely the wow factor for me. And it's a little bit drier than I was expecting. If you just look at the level, I sort of expected it to be a little warmer, but it's actually not. It kind of has this dry, and again, a lot of treble heavy, a lot of higher overtones. I think sort of gives you a drier mid and is more detailed and a lot sharper, and I think all that works. I was just expecting something a little warmer, but it's really a showcase for the texture and detail retrieval and the resolution. And these really are some of the most intimate and convincing vocals that I've ever heard. It's really quite amazing. And like I said, MEST is a really kind of a big treble set, but my favorite time spent with MEST were on sort of these acoustic sets. Diana Krall's Body and Soul, or Rebecca Pidgeon's Spanish Harlem. These songs that are just female vocal centric. Maybe there's another instrument or two, but very, very detailed vocals, very intimate performances. And those things literally come across just like that person is standing in front of you. Yeah, it's that part really kind of blew me away. And the treble stuff is all kind of fun, but when you get into really enjoyable, which parts really resonated with me, it was very much these vocals, how they're placed in space right in front of you, how intimate they are, how detailed. Yeah, it's kind of an insane amount of resolution without it being forced, without it really going off natural. And I had this thing where this MEST tinted sound, because everything sounds a little bit, maybe a little bit higher because of the treble, the way they did it. But I will say it's a MEST tinted sound. It's not the most natural, but when you combine it with this crazy amount of detail and staging and resolution, for me, it just became this audio playground for exploring some of your favorite tracks. It's very, very different, very impressive, very hard to figure out what they did to really pull this off. So the treble, really the amount of detail and detail retrieval and extension really set this set apart from pretty much anything else that I've tried. Even something like Trio, which probably has better bass, but not really anywhere near how this staging and treble is done on MEST. It's kind of extraordinary, really, really is. And they're not really hiding anything either. It's all right there. Great level and detailed and sharp and fast and very much overwhelming at first, as I said. But then after a day or two, you sort of settle into it and your brain adjusts to it and it becomes a much more enjoyable experience. And that's exactly what happened to me. So there is more of an upper mid, lower treble emphasis. And, maybe that is here on the graph there, but I didn't really dwell on that too much because the upper is not lost at all. There's just so much clarity and detail across the whole range that it's really hard to pick on an upper or lower kind of situation. That's just not the way it is. But yeah, clarity and detail retrieval, amazing. So staging and imaging, and this is the other bit of the coherence part. So either you're going to love how separate things are, or you're going to consider it too separated and a little disjointed and a little incoherent. And I've heard people describe this in sort of terms of preferences. Some people like a stage on an IEM where all the instruments are sort of in the field of view, sort of a little closer together as they would be playing on stage. It helps you hear all the instruments all at once. And that's not really what MEST does. MEST does this super separation, and things tend to be, vocalists are very close to you. You might have an instrument behind you, to your left, one kind of in your upper right, something above you. Stuff is spread out all over the place, not necessarily in the same pattern that you would have if you were viewing a performance on stage. So I think it, I don't know, it doesn't bother me, but having read that comment in the past on other sets where stages get too wide and some people can't process how, all these instruments sound together, I sort of get it, but I think that would be the other point of, is it perfectly incoherent? And it probably is for me. It's done so well that it does add to the experience and the uniqueness. And yeah, so that's my take on MEST. Yeah, an amazing set. It definitely had me at a loss for words on that first day. It's just so overwhelming. And even now, kind of, when I think about other reviews that I've read on it and how they describe the sound and what it really sounds like in your ear, two almost totally different things. I don't think I spent 15 minutes trying to describe some of the things that I thought about. And, I don't think those adequately cover what it really sounds like in your ear and how amazing it is. So, again, thank you everyone who told me to buy this one 2 years ago. I probably should have, but thank you for the loaner, and very much appreciated. So thank you guys, and I'll see you next time.